Okay. Welcome to Oh Brother, Not Another Podcast. My name is Mig Sparrows, and we are an official Apple podcast, and we are on 727 other podcast platforms as well. And
I'm Trace Burrows. And if you like the show today, please give us a nice review. Today we have Sally Taylor on the show, a singer, songwriter, musician, and founder of Consenses. And she'll tell us all about what that's all about and how she got to there. So, hi, Sally.
Hi, guys. Hi.
So, what is Consensus?
Consensus is sort of like a game of telephone, but played with art instead of words. So if you remember what the childhood game of telephone is, it's where one person whispers something in another person's ear, and it keeps on going from one person to the next. And at the end, you sort of have this jumbled version of the original. With Consensus, we take a photograph and we give it to a musician and let it inspire a song in them. And then that song gets sort of whispered to a dancer, and the dancer dances about it. And the dance then goes to a poet who writes about the dance. And then the poem goes to a perfumer who creates a fragrance. The fragrance inspires a painter, and so on and so forth until all of the seven or all of the five senses are represented. And then we give that entire chain reaction to a set designer who then interprets the entire thing as a whole and creates a space in which that sort of jumble of art, that collaboration of artistic voices or art about art can live within and sort of inspire audiences. So whereas the original game of telephone, you end with this sort of like mutilated version of the original thing. With Consensus, you get this final version, which offers you new inspiration through which to see the rest of the art. And the way that it, is meant to be watched or looked at or, inspired by is to recognize that you're an artist too. Every time you look at something, you are taking it in a specific way and letting it live within you in a certain way. And that's different than anybody else's way. It's not right or wrong. It's just as valid and unique, but also not right. It's a piece of the whole puzzle, but it's not the right version. It just exists as a piece of art within you, even as you expose your belief systems based on it in future. It is just a piece of the puzzle, not the entire thing.
I just wanted to add something which I neglected to say in the intro, that you're also the daughter of musicians James Taylor and Carly Simon. So I think the audience would,
Sure.
Put it in context.
That.
Yes, creators. I come from a line of them for sure.
Yeah, I saw your the documentary on Consensus. It was on Martha's Vineyard. At the time, and in that famous, was it a lodge? I've been there, but I can't remember. That.
The Grange Hall, yep.
Yeah, the hall, yeah. So is that open to you just take it over, or you rent it for a month and sort of take it over? And
we put that first exhibition was 150 artists collaborating around the world. And so it needed a lot of space. And so we toured that through mostly Massachusetts and a few other states, but the Grange was the first starting place for that. And we just rented it. We put it up for 3 days. It was this crazy free for all, needed 70, volunteers to help me put it together. And then we ran workshops off of it and did big performances with, all the artists, participating together on stage. It was really a festival for the senses. It was like creator extravaganza. So that was a really cool exhibition, and we've done them at Mass MoCA. We've done them at different we've done them in Wellesley College. We've done them a number of different places, and it's taken on, it's become a podcast itself. I have my own podcast. Can you believe it? In which we run one of these Consensus chains through a season, and it's just become sort of, it's a process, and it's and we get to work it all over the world, which is what's really exciting.
So when you do this in other places, other than Martha's Vineyard, is it a whole new set of artists, or you just take the show you have and transport it to different places?
No, it's a whole different set of artists. And we're actually just piloting this program right now where we create local consensuses. So they're these sort of consensus walks is what we're calling them. And we find little towns and cities around the world who have amazing local artists. And we create these consensus walks, this process by which a local piece of art that inspires all of the artists in a community. And then we create a walking tour through each of those artists' sort of spaces.
Well,
Yeah, it's always different. Yeah.
I mean, we're both visual artists, and we're in Westport, Connecticut, which is a fairly well-known artist community, has been since the 1920s. So hypothetically, and maybe not so hypothetically, and we have a artist group here called the Artist Collective of Westport, and there's 150 members. Is that something we could do, or do you have a template for that, or do you manage it if we wanted to do something?
Yeah, let's do one.
Yeah. Really?
The way that it works is we just ask, somebody be a point person for it, and then basically help us find the artists and then create the tour with them. And they're sort of responsible for maintaining it and making sure that it's all stays in one piece. But that's pretty easy. It's pretty easy lifting. So yeah, let's do it.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah.
So
yeah.
When you put this together, which took you many years, right? The first one, Sally, that what would your process? Because these artists, you say, come from all over the world, and there's so many artists in every different kind of artistic discipline. So, like, did you decide, well, now I'm going to find a perfumer? What's a perfumer?
They're actually called noses, but I call them perfume. I mean, it's such a weird thing to be called.
Noses.
Like, yeah.
So you have a team that helps you, and you say, like, now I want to do like noses and people, and like get me all the names of all the interesting noses around the world, and then you just like that's a side tangent. How do they have portfolios? Visual artists, you can see what they do. How do you like
scratch and sniff?
Yeah.
If the website, how does that work?
Well, the first one that I created, the first consensus I created, I guess what I did, and I do consider the act of consensus a very creative process by which I paint with artists. I mean, that's what I'm sort of doing. Every time a piece would come back, I would then ask the piece, or ask the piece that lived in my heart, who do I want to understand this through? Like, who do I want to, who do I want to see or smell or taste or watch the movement of, to understand this in a better and a bigger way. And then I would go find that person. So if a song came back and it said like, oh man, I want to be smelled, right? I want to express myself through, if the spirit of the song came back and said, I want to be expressed through a scent, I would go find that perfumer. And then I'd, explain that, I needed them to interpret it into a scent. And that's how that worked. I mean, that's how consensus as a process becomes a very sort of artistic experience.
How did you find the perfumer?
The perfumer. So I had to do a lot of research around what perfumers are. And there's only really 5 main giant factories. Like, one is International Fragrances and Flavors. But everything that has a scent has come through every perfume or every soap or every shampoo, everything that has a scent has actually been through one of those factories. And so I had to find somebody at one of those factories, and then I had to, inspire them to help me to find the right perfumers. So it was just sort of that. And then there's also, not to get into the minutia about scent, but there's people who only work with organic, fragrances, flowers that have been pressed and things that have been pressed. And then there's people who work with the chemical representations of those things. And so there's very purist people, and I would contact them and get there. It's much more expensive to have the pressed version of these things. But I wanted to represent the entire field. So I wasn't just going through the main, companies that do fragrance, but rather finding the small boutique fragrancers, noses, if you will, that that could create those different representations of those paintings and perfume sculptures and dances.
So I'm curious, and you tell a very touching story in the documentary, and you, or maybe it was in your TED talk about, you know, coming home from school with a little piece of paper. I don't know, you were 8 years old or something, and your mom opened it up and said you've been diagnosed as being dyslexic, and she said, "Welcome to the family," which is a really a wonderful approach to, instead of, you know, crying or whatever else. But related to the art, I'm wondering, well, first of all, I think most people are naive about dyslexia. I mean, in the most simplistic terms, it's like, well, I see the word cat, C-A-T, and you see T-A-C. Is it as simplistic as that? Or, and the second part of it is, how do you think dyslexia has enhanced or enhanced this approach to, you know, to work with, is it heightened your other perceptions, or, you know?
Yeah, that's a very near and dear question to my heart, because my husband has an organization called Noticeability, which creates curricula that is dedicated to the strength-based neurology in every dyslexic. And so, you know, we've been traveling around the world for almost a year now, bringing that curricula to different places. And my curricula, the Consensus curricula, is also part of his curriculum. So, yeah, I think that dyslexia, and I come from a long line of dyslexics, and I have a son who's dyslexic, a husband that's dyslexic. I mean, we're definitely in a sort of dyslexic and proud camp. I think it's mostly because we can identify with one another and with other dyslexics that have come before us who've been successful. And I think that the dyslexic predisposed neurological processing is actually really, it caters to creativity. It caters to large scale thinking. It caters to spatial and narrative reasoning. So I think that it definitely has helped me in my creativity. And I was just talking actually to my son's assessment provider, his neurological assessment provider, who was talking to me about dyslexia and about sort of how to enhance the skills that he's going to need to get through school. And I was thinking, I wonder if those skills had been, you know, worked on in me, if it would have been at the detriment of some of my creativity. And so I guess I want to just be careful in, you know, what we've been saying to our son for a long time is, don't let education get, you know, or don't let school get in the way of your education. I think that, you know, don't let things that other people prioritize, you know, convince you out of the things that you're actually good at and passionate about. So, yeah, I would say that I'm lucky in that my family sort of recognized that the priority was the meanness of me and not the potential of me. So.
And you become more, I mean, reading is a visual process, and but maybe, I don't know, I don't know the difference, but obviously it's either focused you on visuals and that whole, like you said, chain of relationships, visual relationships, which sounds like a, you know, just like you may never have gotten there without it. But
So
yeah.
Go ahead. Did you want Sally?
Oh, no, I was just going to follow up by saying that I didn't answer your original question because I can only actually hold two questions in my head at the same time. But the original one was, you know, the misconceptions around dyslexia, you know, that it's reading backward. Really, it's a processing problem, you know, or a processing difference whereby the written word is not a great vehicle for the meaning and the way that I process information. And so that's really what dyslexia is, you know, problem with, since the printing press came into invention. That's my.
have you ever heard, I've heard the word, but somebody explained it to me. I think it's synesthesia, where people smell colors and taste words and that kind of thing? Is that entered into the
I think
consensus?
everybody does that. I mean, I really do think that if you actually had to, and we play this game called Essences all the time, it's part of our curriculum, whereby we have people sort of close their eyes, look at a piece of art, close their eyes, and imagine what it would be if it were a flavor.
Mhm.
What would it be if it were a body of water? What would it be if it were a time of day? What would it be if it were a color? What would it be if it were a song? And people are able to do that. So it makes me question whether that's actually something that's out of the ordinary.
Hmm.
I mean, even if you're just somebody who comes up with metaphors every once in a while, like that's synesthetic, I think. So I don't know if synesthetic is the right word.
Yeah.
Synesthesia-y.
Yeah.
I'm gonna switch gears a little. So, like, when did you start singing or writing songs and decide to do that? How old were you?
I think my first song was called Great Managized to the Web, and it was on piano, and it was, if you be my fine musician, I will be your fine musician, let me know. So obviously that's a terrible song, but I think I started writing when I was very little, just playing around with melody, and that's, melody and chord structure have always been the thing that have interested me most about writing. And so the way, I think I wrote my very first sort of written song when I was like 15 or 16. I used to wake up in the middle of the night with a song fully written in my head, and then I press record. I had a little recorder next to my bed, and I just record it. But I didn't actually play guitar at the time. So I just did that for years before I actually said, okay, I've got to figure out how to play guitar in order to accompany these songs. And they were fully baked with, melodies and lyrics and everything. And so it was more just trying to then find the guitar to accompany it.
Did
you look on Craigslist for a good guitar teacher?
There was no Craigslist back then. There was no computers back then. I'm old.
Our birthdays are, I'm January 5th. You're January 7th, right?
That's right.
No, you're not old.
So did you ever get to the point, like, because of your parents, like careers looming over your head about the style of songs, like topics or approach to your music, or just came naturally, like you just did your thing, or did you always have to think, like, I don't want to get too much like my dad? I don't want to be, because you're searching for your own identity or this kind of stuff.
I mean, yeah, I think when I got in a plane crash in Peru when I was 20, and I had all of those songs written, on my tape recorder. And the thing that I thought when I hit the ground was, I've got to get those songs into some sort of organized system. And so I wanted to sort of clean them up, and I wanted to record them, semi-professionally. And I was 20 at the time. So I went to a therapist. I was like, this is a terrible idea, right? Like, it's a really bad idea for me to like record myself singing these songs. I worked on it for a long time because I just knew that it was going to mess with, it was basically like stepping foot into the cyclone, and I was perfectly fine just hanging out on the edge of the storm. I had no interest in actually being part of that cyclone. And I actually went to my dad at one point and said, how do I, if I'm going to do this, how do I avoid, getting wrapped up in it? And he said, well, just don't read anything that they say about you, good or bad, because if you believe the good, you will believe the bad. If you believe the applause, you'll believe the boos. Like, that's just the way it goes. And I think that was sort of the advice that I went on the most. And I had a great time performing and writing music and playing for years on the road. We toured quite extensively around the United States through the end of the 90s and into the next millennium, to the next century. but when I met my husband, I was done playing with that muse and found my own.
And where did you, his name's Dean, I can't pronounce the last name.
Dragonnier, yeah.
Dragonnier, okay.
Yeah.
Did you meet in a creative situation? I mean, was it, you were on an Aspen somewhere, or where?
No, I knew not to marry a musician. I knew not to marry an artist, because then he would always have a mistress on the side with his muse.
Right. Mm.
He and I met on Martha's Vineyard. He was a lifeguard when I was 16 and he was 17. We met on this beach, this nude beach on Martha's Vineyard.
Great.
And no, he wasn't nude. That's always the first question. So no, he's not nude.
I wasn't going to ask that.
You were. I saw you.
But you were nude.
I was nude. None of my girlfriends wanted to come with me to the beach, so I just go and read all day and play in the waves. And he was there watching somewhere on one of the lifeguard chairs, lurking. But it took us years. It took us years to find the right time for our relationship.
Are you still teaching at Berkeley?
I'm not. When I started Consensus in 2012, it became sort of all consuming. So I haven't been teaching except for, doing teacher trainings which I do, periodically for the curriculum.
No, the family I know there, and this is like asking, hey, I know somebody in the United States. So
I have also been to the planet Earth.
Yeah.
Like,
I knew we had
go
somebody.
down, you pass a tree, and then you take a left.
Yeah, right. So, the other thing was on your bio, or what? And is that well, you said you're just now earlier you're a vegetarian, but somewhere in your bio it said you're a vegan. So did you transition to being a vegetarian from a vegan? A vegan's a little more strict, right?
I actually don't know where that bio that you saw came from. I think I was a vegan for like 20 minutes after watching, some documentary about it. I'm a vegetarian because my son at 4 was like, I don't want to eat my friends, and then and then we were like, fine, but I hope you're okay with us eating your friends, because that's what's going to happen. And so we did for many years, and finally he sort of got to us. By the time he was about 8, he was like, it would mean a lot to me if you didn't eat meat anymore. And so we sort of like, we're like, well, what about meat and what about fish? And then we had that for a while, and then, finally just said, no, it's somewhere along the line, we actually started to feel overly conscientious about the fact that we were eating bodies.
Or anything that could have a name. It's like, that's sort of where you draw the line,
I don't know exactly where the line is drawn, but it hasn't gotten to vegetables yet, which I'm grateful for.
Do you cook? Are you a good cook, or do you?
Since COVID, I've become a pretty good chef for my family. I make, I think art is just one thing anyway. So it comes out in food too.
Yeah.
Whatever I have to offer artistically comes out in food too.
And that's so visual. I mean, food can be so visual. I mean, most of it's visual.
When you've had 5 albums, right?
3.
3. Oh, I thought it was.
But I like where you're going with that.
So, when you approach, like, I'm going to write a bunch of songs and make another album. I mean, do you think, like, I'm going to do things with this new style, different style of song, acoustic songs, or a different approach, or I'm going to think about nature more, or I'm going to do this? I mean, how do you get down to sort of like the overall theme of a new album? What is your approach to that?
I think, like most of the art that I create, I don't know what it's about until after it's done.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that the way that I write songs, I start with a palette of chords, and I let the chords then dictate my emotional state. And then from that emotional state comes a sort of weird, like, almost like projectile series of phrasing and vowel sounds and a melody line that comes with it. And then from that, I try to make sense of the words that those vowel sounds might actually be similar to, I think I don't know where that, I don't know anybody else who necessarily does that way. I think my dad does it a little bit like that. But whenever whenever somebody says, well, how do you want to write a song? Like, let's start with some lyrics or an idea. And I'm like, no, like that. I cannot possibly get there from here. Like, wherever you think that we can go with this is a dead end for me. So that's my process. I don't really think about, like, songs just sort of spring, especially from my sleep state, thank God, because that's the longest time I can actually write something before my internal judge gets hold of it and wrangles it to the ground and stomps it out like a rhinoceros with a fire.
Yeah. We have a few minutes up, but I don't know if I was conflicted about showing this at all, but anyway, this is from this week's New Yorker. Have you seen this?
I didn't, but that looks like my dad. I can already see by the actual body language.
It's their, they always have a humor page, and this, I don't know, it's so weird that so this shouts and murmurs, and it says, why shouldn't you room with James Taylor? And there's a bunch of reasons not to room. I'll just read a few of them. I hope your father has a sense. Does he have?
He does.
Have sense of humor about? Okay.
Yeah. I'm sure I can add a few.
So you wanted to decorate the mantle with tasteful dried flowers and candles, but James insists that that's where all 6 of his Grammys should go.
It's definitely not.
He's
the most humble pie person on the planet, so that's not true. Yeah.
If it rains and you build a fire in the fireplace, James Taylor smugly goes, I've seen both of those before. Let's see.
Making up stuff like your dad's not like that at all, probably, right?
Yeah, well, this is just the humor.
It's very funny. Yeah.
Goofy thing. Anyway, there's a bunch of them, but I won't read them. But I was
yeah.
To lead into the thing, whether they have your parents have a sense of humor.
I would say 2 of the funniest people on the face of the earth. Yeah. And just willing to laugh, at pretty much everything, I mean, my mom could get home from a surgery, and you could pick up the Band-Aid, and she could just start howling, there's just no end to their senses of humor. It's very fun. It's very fun. And
that's healthy. Yeah.
So the show you have now at the Consensus show that's currently there, that's the same one that's in the documentary. How long will that be there until you decide to make a new one, or are you?
So the one from Martha's Vineyard, that one only showed from 2014 through 2017. Then we did one at Mass MoCA in North Adams, Massachusetts, and that was up for a year. And then, we've done, a number of different small projects. They're all on our website. And then this newest pilot is, going to be making neighborhoods into art galleries. That's the whole sort of premise, is taking the museum out of the museum and bringing it into the community.
Community being out like on building fronts and stores fronts, or inside?
Yeah. So the way that'll work when we work together and create our Consensus guys is that we'll find different artists who are in the community, including chefs and clothing designers and jewelry makers and painters and singer-songwriters, and we will have them interpret something that's already monumental and fundamental to your neighborhood. And then we'll have them interpreting each other's work through the different mediums. And then we'll create a walking tour that starts with the original monumental piece of art. And then, when people scan the QR code, it starts playing the song that was written, inspired it. And then it'll say, do you want to taste this song? Walk down to this local, cafe and try the coffee that was inspired by it. And then, you'll move off to the art gallery down the street to see the painting that was inspired by the coffee, and so on and so forth. So that's how the current Consensus Project is working. It's artistic muscles, I guess.
Wow. Well, so before we sign off, what's the best way? Should we just reach you through should anybody reach you through your website? Just the
That's
contact.
a perfect place. Yeah.
Okay. And
yeah. Consensusart at Gmail, consensusart@gmail.com. So it's just consensus with the senses. So
right.
CONSENSES art at Gmail.
Okay. Well, we'll definitely be in touch, and I hope other people will too. It's really a great way to. It's so inclusive and way to embody.
Walk, look around here. They have those arts in the window shows and stuff, and this is a way to make some kind of sense of.
Yeah, the art in the windows is just a passive. Yeah, I mean, it's just decorative. People walk by, well, that's pretty, but there's no content. There's no kind of like chain to it. There's no.
Yeah. I'm hoping that it'll sort of show the sort of mycelial undercurrent of a community that the artists make that's usually invisible, but when they work together, you can actually see the sort of scaffolding of a community through its art.
All right. Well,
thanks for coming on the show and telling us all this stuff. This is like really interesting for us and probably for a lot of people that listen to our show.
That's nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sally.
Lovely to meet both of you guys. And I hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Okay. Take care.